Ever notice how every time a Republican takes office, the Democrats start acting like it's the end of the world? I mean, the minute we cut taxes or trim the budget, they start screaming that the sky is falling. Now, don't get me wrong, I admire their consistency. If the stock market surges, they say it's just helping the rich. And if it crashes, they say, yep, that's what happens under Republican leadership. And don't even get me started on foreign policy. A Republican president could be shaking hands with world leaders and signing peace deals, and they'd say, it must be appeasement. But the minute there's tension overseas, they rush to the nearest camera like it's Black Friday saying, see, we told you the world would catch fire if he was in charge. Now, I've always said, it's fine to disagree on policy. That's democracy. But if your best shot at winning is hoping the American people lose, well, maybe you're in the wrong country.
Good morning, everyone. Words from our great leader, former President Ronald Reagan. I think we all can agree he is 100% right. I am Tabitha Hassell with Tabs on Tap. Happy Friday, everyone. So excited to see you all this morning. And let's see, I got to scroll just a little bit back. You guys are way ahead of me this morning. Sometimes my scroll doesn't always work as well. Good morning, Kim. Good morning, Larry. Good morning, Robert. And yes, Kim, he is 100% right. Good morning, Rob. And good morning, Dottie. Dottie says, I just got finished listening to Dr. Naputi for 2 hours. Took me back to the early days of The Edge. You got that right, Dottie. And good morning, Linda. You know, who doesn't want to start their morning out with a little bit of Ronald Reagan, right? Such a legend. And one of these days, we're going to get Ken Lee on. He listens to the show once in a while. I think he's a very busy man, but he flew Marine One for Ronald Reagan. So I can't wait to hear some of those stories. I'm going to reach out to him today and say, when are you coming on to talk to us? Because we want to know, what was it like? And for George Bush as well. He also flew Marine One for George Bush. So I think that's pretty interesting. Lots to talk about today. Let's talk about it being Friday. I don't know about you guys, but I'm really glad it's a Friday and I'm freezing. I have a jacket, if you guys can tell. And thankfully, I had it back here. I came back here with the short sleeve shirt on. I'm like, man, I'm cold. I usually always wear long sleeves. And thankfully, I had a jacket hanging back here on the chair. I'm like, oh, I'm going to grab that, which delayed me a couple minutes to throw my jacket on and get my microphone and stuff back together. Lots to talk about today. Nothing ever changes. I'm going to talk about that meteor that came through the southeast last night, or was it a meteor? You know, it is a little bit strange, as many things are these days. I'm not sure, probably space debris more so than an actual meteorite, but it did land on a house. And I'm going to show you a couple different videos, as well as some radar that took place during that same time, which is definitely strangely suspicious. So we're going to take a look at that. So many things to talk about. You know, I want to talk about Lindsey Graham, warmonger, still looking for the, uranium in Iran. He will not stop. Reminds me of the days when we were looking for the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. You know, where are they? Gee, we thought they were there, but we didn't get them. Where could they possibly be now? I want to talk about a murder plot. These little girls plotted to murder one of their classmates at recess. How crazy is that? And then the punishment. We're going to talk about Zohran Mamdani and should we or should we not ban Sharia law in the United States. We're going to talk about North Korea. There's a lot to talk about today. Pakistan. I've been talking a lot about Pakistan lately, and the reason why is because we talk so much about Iran being our enemy. And by the way, we in the United States, we arrested 130 Iranians who were here illegally in the United States. They will, of course, be deported because our government, they're out looking for those sleeper cells. Because you know what? The next time something's happened, we really want to be worried about 1,500 Iranian sleeper cells? No. So let's get them out now so that when the time comes, we don't have to worry about it. But the problem is, a lot of those sleeper cells are probably here illegally. You know, a lot of these countries, they know what to do. They're going to get their people here legally. They're working regular jobs. They're living their regular lives. And all of a sudden they get that call and the switch takes place. But as I've said many times, I am far, far less concerned with Iranian sleeper cells than I am a lot of other groups out there. That includes the Pakistanis. And people always say, gosh, what did the Pakistanis do to us? Well, they are a huge sponsor of terrorism, their country being taken over by Sunni rebel groups. So, yes, that's a problem. They have nuclear weapons already. Pakistan already has nuclear weapons, which is probably why they've become this new hotspot of terrorist activity. Another state, another country that allows a state of terrorism to take over within their country. And now we hear a US intelligence report stating that they are creating nuclear ballistic missiles that can reach the United States. That's insane, isn't it? Good morning, Sherry. So I said I'd talk about it later, but I pretty much talked about it now. And it's just crazy to me that that could even be taking place, around the world. We've always been very lucky where we've never had weapons aimed directly at us. We might think, well, Iran is the enemy, or Iraq is our enemy, or, whichever country's our enemy. But these countries typically do not have ballistic missiles that can reach us. Now, we know there's some that do, which is why we fear, a nuclear attack. But Pakistan, that's a different story if they're developing nuclear weapons, because it's somewhere down the line as they progress and continue into becoming this Islamic caliphate, then what we're going to see is a new threat from Pakistan. I have no doubt somewhere down the road we'll probably be at war with Pakistan, because even though I know somebody might say, well, gee, they just nominated Donald Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. But that does not mean that they're not going to be our enemy down the road and hold that nuclear weapon above us. Good morning, Karen. And good morning, Sherry. I think I'm not. I lose track sometimes of who I've said hi to. So good morning, Sherry, to you maybe twice. So some other things I want to get out is I really wish I could have shown you guys these photos. I have such a hard time loading photos into the system, but I'm going to post these on social media later. I've been seeing all of these photos of Michelle Obama. Have you guys seen those? She doesn't even look like the same person. Does not even look like the same person. And I've seen people talking about, well, maybe she's taking Ozempic, or maybe she had a facelift, or she seriously looks 20 years younger. Wearing her hair, I saw a photo of her wearing her hair in like a Bo Derek, braid straight down. She looked like one of her daughters. It was, I don't know what she's doing, whatever it is she's doing. I need to do what she's doing. I kid you not, she looked 20 years younger, didn't even look like herself. And of course, people online speculating, oh, it's not her. They replaced her, because she was going to divorce Obama, all this crazy stuff. And then there was this one photo of her where she had the craziest looking, like, alien head. And then somebody asked Grok, well, is this an altered photo of Michelle Obama? And Grok's like, no, it's not altered. I don't see any, sign of alteration, which is pretty darn funny. And I wish I could show you those photos to you. I'll have to post them later. I did get to post this photo. Speaking of terror threats, I'm going to throw this in there real quick before it doesn't show up. I want you to take a look at this. Do you see that? You can see how tiny that is. That's a Chinese drone. And China is developing these little teeny tiny drones. Now, it would be nice to say, oh, this is for fireworks, or, it's going to be a display of, something, but it's not. These are attack drones, and they're so tiny. But China claims that these little tiny drones can take out a target, which I don't see how, quite honestly. And maybe there's more that they outfit it to do. But then I started thinking about it. It doesn't take much to really take out a target if you think about it. They could lace one of these with some type of poison, even as something as crazy as fentanyl. The teeniest, tiniest drop of fentanyl will kill a person, instantaneously. So who knows what it is they have plans with these little tiny drones. But it just goes to show that there really is no way to protect yourself. If for some reason, let's say you're a head of state or a leader, or you're just somebody your own government doesn't like, it doesn't take much to come after you. How are you going to hide from this little bitty drone? You could be, going to the grocery store and this thing could find you in a second. That's crazy, isn't it? And I know here in the United States, we have little drones. They're as tiny as a mosquito. Because why? Because old Billy Gates released them into the United States to stop the Zika virus, but they're really just little tiny drones that look like mosquitoes. And of course, they did release, remember, hundreds of thousands of genetically modified mosquitoes. So there's all kinds of crazy stuff that's going on. Nothing new there. And I wanted to show you guys these, speaking of these videos of what is allegedly a meteorite. And it's so strange because I'm like, is it a meteor or is it not? It's kind of a weird, I'm trying to find it here. I've got a couple of different videos of it. I'm gonna show a couple different videos. Here's one. Yeah, that's in Pembroke, Florida, not Georgia. Let's say that one more time. This happened simultaneously to the meteor that was seen in Georgia, but this is Pembroke, Florida. I'm gonna backtrack that and then stop it so we can see what that is, because it just looks like something flying, doesn't it? I can't really tell what that is. Maybe I'm gonna think maybe space debris. I don't know, but you could hear it and it was on fire and it landed. A woman took this video in Florida. Now, this is not the same as the drone that was seen in Georgia. It is not the same. Let me see if I can. I want to make sure I pull up the wrong video. So I'll stop it really fast if I pull up the wrong one. Yep, there it is. There's no sound. Now, that's the one that was seen in Georgia. Two very different things there. And then we have the radar, and this is the radar of what took place at that exact same time. I'm going to show you. Let's see, that's another version of that. There's a bunch of different versions of that same Georgia meteorite, or what they're saying is meteorite, probably space debris. There's another view of it. Not the same one in Florida. And there was a very similar looking meteorite, or what we assume is a meteorite, that went over Texas recently, right? Went right over the Starlink facility. And there was another one somewhere else that also happened this past week. So lots of that going on. Here's the radar that took place during that time. Now, what in the world is that? Again, no sound, no sound, just me. Let's see here. I'm gonna play that again, and then I'm gonna stop at midway. Because that's really weird, isn't it? Okay, well, I missed it. I'm gonna try it again. All right, so I'm gonna stop it right there. So during the time that this meteor fell across the southeast in Georgia, at the same time as whatever that fiery object was that was coming down in Florida, this is the radar image. And I don't know what that is. Some people say, oh, it's mayflies. We're in the middle of our mayfly invasion. But that is not mayflies, because mayflies don't suddenly appear. You just see them on the radar for a really long time. What this is, what that meteorite is, I do not know, but I think it's really strange. And I'm going to guess it's probably space debris. Something probably crashed through our atmosphere, and that's why you see that spread out in that way. Probably little pieces going everywhere, one going into Florida, a larger chunk coming down through Georgia. But we'll probably find out, because that one in Georgia actually landed on a house. I don't know if you guys saw the photo of that, but it came through the roof and it went down literally into the house, and the people who live there have whatever it was. And at that time, of course, it was something very tiny. A lot of people are saying, oh, that's a bullet hole. It was a little bit bigger than a bullet hole. So I'm sure that the news is already, investigating. They've already been out and taken some reports and some photos of where this thing came through. I have a feeling it's probably going to be space debris, but these days they lie to us so much. You just never know what might be going on. It's awfully strange. But then to correlate, though, with the fact that it could have been a meteorite, or maybe just more space debris. That again, there was a report. I wish I could remember the other state. There was one on the June the 15th that looked very similar to, it was in Mexico on June the 15th that looked very similar to this. And then there was one that came over SpaceX. Allegedly, it was on June the 17th, and both looked just like this. Now, this one over Georgia, sorry, I'm looking out my window because I saw a car go by. Somebody came into my driveway the other day and stole some things, and it was like an old woman in a silver minivan. I just saw a silver minivan slow down by the driveway. So sorry about that distraction. It is a live show. Um, you guys were here listening to me, and I was like, why does that alarm keep going off? What's going on out there? And then, yeah, it was somebody coming into the driveway stealing things, is exactly what that was. Anyway, we will carry on. We'll find out eventually what it was, what it wasn't. Jay says there are numerous groups and agencies that track space debris trash, right? And no one said anything about space debris coming into the atmosphere yesterday or on any of those days. So I don't know. It would just seem like a normal meteorite to me if it wasn't for that radar image. So, lots of other things to get to. I love the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. She's one of my favorite of all of the leaders, probably my favorite person within NATO. But there is something going on with this woman. I don't know if any of you guys saw this video. And after she came out of NATO, of course, reporters are talking to our Italian reporters, just like our American reporters want to talk to Trump and ask him questions. Well, they did the same thing with Giorgia Meloni. And I don't know what is going on with her, if you guys saw this video or not. And I'm not accusing her of being on drugs or anything like that, but there is something very strange going on in this video. Now, I have a feeling this was sped up just a teeny tiny bit, not a lot, but if you see this, the voices don't sound sped up. That's why not a lot. But if you've noticed at the beginning of the video, there's a man who kind of walks through and he seems a little bit faster than what's natural. And Vernon says, I saw one come over Eastern Oregon about 20 years ago. I've seen many meteorites fly over but nothing, nothing unusual, just your typical meteorite. And they said this one, by the way, in the Southeast was so big that it produced a sonic boom. It was huge. And they said, now that they said is rare. Now here's this video of Giorgia Meloni. I'm curious what you guys think.
Buonasera. Dunque, si conclude un vertice importante, tanto chiaramente per gli impegni. Un messaggio molto importante, mi pare di avervi detto tutto.
Qual è stata la reazione di Trump?
Su una politica espansiva.
Presidente, ma noi come faremo a produrre proiettili, carri armati?
Non mi pare che risolviamo grandi problemi.
L'opposizione diceva che l'Italia avrebbe potuto fare come la Spagna, no?
Presidente, scusi, con il Presidente Trump è riuscito a parlare ieri sera anche del tema dazi?
Si chiude al 10% i dazi. Tajani ha detto che va bene così, lei è d'accordo?
Impegnatissima per ottenere questo risultato.
Aumenti sostenibili, ha detto l'Italia, però parliamo comunque di circa 100 miliardi in 10 anni, così è il calcolo, tra sicurezza e difesa.
Dobbiamo andare, Presidente, dobbiamo andare.
Very expressive, to say the least. And maybe that's all it is. Maybe just very expressive. I really like her. She really likes Donald Trump. And I always thought her and Elon Musk maybe had a special connection. If you've seen some of the videos of them together, she's a beautiful woman. She's certainly one of us, I feel. But what was going on there, I do not know. I don't know. I've been seeing that video going out around a lot with people asking the exact same questions. I know, Dottie. It's her eyes. Now, she does have very big eyes. She has very pretty eyes. And maybe she's just very expressive. Maybe there's absolutely nothing more to it than her being expressive. But I've never seen her look like that in other videos before. I don't know. Maybe she had something in her eyes. Who knows? I wear contact lenses. There's times when I feel like I kind of look around like that too. But there's a lot of jokes going around behind the scenes about her getting into Elon Musk's drug stash, which of course I don't think is true. And if you guys recall, a lot of people were saying that Elon Musk is a drug user, uses ketamine and all these different things. And then Elon Musk, of course, he had a drug test done and publicly released those results to the world that said he had 0 drugs in his system. But I thought that video was so funny because I really do like Giorgia Meloni, but I'm like, girl, What is going on? Again, lots of things to talk about. I'm just kind of shuffling through things today just because there is so many things I want to cover in a very short period of time. I don't know if you guys heard about this story or not in Arizona. Now, this happened in October, and People Magazine just did a story about it. I hadn't even heard about this case, and I'm just curious what you guys think when it comes to children, what type of punishment they receive. And this is a story out of Arizona where, and you guys may have heard about it back in October. I did not, but of course, back in October, I was in Georgia, on the campaign trail. So I missed a lot of news at that time. But these four little girls, apparently a little boy cheated on one of, if you could say that is even a term for a 10 and 11-year-old. But these four little girls are 10 and 11 years old, and they plotted to murder this little boy during recess. And here's what's so crazy about it. Not only did they plot to murder him, but they plotted to stage it as a suicide. And amongst these four little girls, each one of them had their own role. One was going to bring the knife, one was going to do the stabbing, one had written out the suicide notes, the other one was going to lure him there. I mean, this is four little girls coming up, 10 and 11 years old, coming up with a very elaborate plan to murder a fellow student during recess. And what ended up happening is that some of the other kids overheard this plot. They thought the plot out pretty well, except for keeping quiet about it. And so these kids, of course, turned them in. Thank God. Thank God, because I really do think these little girls would have murdered that little boy. And what happened is the school expelled them and sent them home. I mean, I don't understand that. To me, I get it when you're 10 and 11 years old and your brain is not fully formed, you're not fully developed in your way of thinking, but my gosh, and I'm not saying that a 10 and 11-year-old should be thrown in an adult prison or, put into the juvenile system forever. But to me, and maybe this is just my line of thinking, I don't know. But if you're 10 and 11 years old and you're plotting to murder someone in such an elaborate way, I really think maybe you shouldn't ever enter society, because once you have that brain set, that in your mind that it's okay to just murder someone over something so incredibly trivial, maybe you're never going to be okay. I would be really curious what you guys think about that. Ryan says that's the Colombian booger sugar. Oh, on Georgia Maloney. There's something going on with her. I don't know what it was. Maybe we'll find out. Kim says, wow, what the hell? I know, Kim, I'm with you. I just don't understand it. And then when you're dealing with these crimes, we see a lot of crimes. It happens in the St. Louis area. You see 10 and 11-year-old kids, committing carjackings, attempted murder, that type of thing. And I'm sure there's 10 and 11-year-olds who have literally murdered people in the streets in the city of St. Louis, gang related crime. And guess what? When those kids, they're held responsible for it. When you have a 10 and 11-year-old who steals a vehicle, let's say shoots the person driving as a carjacking, guess what? Those little kids, they go to jail. I would be very curious why these 10, 11-year-old, four little girls in Arizona did not go to jail. I don't understand the difference between the two. So I'm going to keep looking into that case and see if anything further ever happens, because that was in October. And these little girls, I mean, gee, what are they going to do? Just enroll them in another school? When are they next gonna, make their next plot? It's a crazy, crazy story, and I was really shocked to see that. And not only that, but to think that it could be such a complex plan that not only I could see some 10 and 11-year-olds coming up with a plan to kill another student. I don't think that part's so far fetched, but to think it out to the degree where they were going to stage it as a suicide and wrote a suicide note for this little boy. Thank God for that little boy and his parents that this never took place and that other students did overhear it. But what a crazy story that is. When I read that, I'm like, what in the world is happening in our country? Is it because we have all of these different television programs. I love those shows, by the way. I wrote a crime blog for years. I've just been too busy to keep up with it. And I love watching Forensic Files, or my favorite was that show Disappeared, because it would show you, this person going about their life like nothing. A lot of times, people that were not involved in any criminal activity or anything nefarious, and they just disappear. And of course, we know that 99% of the time, it's someone within their inner circle or someone they know very well that disappeared them. But sometimes it was a stranger, a stranger case. And those are the ones that I used to write about on my crime blog, was the cases in which it is a stranger abduction or a stranger homicide, because it's so rare. That's why, of course, police start in that inner circle and, make their way out to because it's probably going to be somebody in that inner circle that is, of course, the culprit. But I do wonder if sometimes, I love those shows, but does it make an impression on these young minds, and give them ideas maybe they wouldn't already have or shouldn't already have? Jay says, no action actually taken is my guess. And no, that's so far, no, Jay, you're absolutely right. Jennifer, good morning, Jennifer. Hope you are doing well. And something else I wanted to go, there's a lot of stuff to talk about today. So it's going to seem like a lot of odds and ends, nothing's necessarily piecing together. There's just a lot going on I wanted to cover on a Friday. So I want to talk about this deal in North Korea. And I'm going to be jumping all over the place, by the way. Let's see. Jay says simple lack of parental guidance and repercussions for actions has led to we can do whatever attitude. I agree, Jay. There is so little parental guidance these days. And, a lot of kids are learning a lot of things these days by watching television or movies, or hearing, from their peers. And, I feel like we were so much more sheltered when we were kids. In a way, I feel like the I don't know how to describe it, but I see the trend in movies and TV shows becoming more violent, more satanic than what they were when we were kids. Not that those things didn't exist when we were younger, because they did, but not in the same way they do now. Now you can go to see, so you can turn on the television, you can go to the movie theater, and you can see full nudity, complete full nudity. You can see what I would consider, I wouldn't even call it soft porn, actual porn that takes place on the screen. And you can also see a lot of blood and gore. Now, back when I was younger, we didn't really see all that. There was some. I remember that movie Chainsaw Massacre, of course. That was when I was, you know, very tiny, but I do remember that as one. We had the series of, what was it called? The movies when we were all growing up, or many of us, Jason, remember? You go to the cabin in the woods. I can't remember right now what that series was called, but I mean, it wasn't really as gory as some of the movies are now. And I really think that kids are just exposed to so much more. And, I remember watching Little House on the Prairie, or these were all reruns of The Waltons, or I loved Good Times, were some of my favorite shows. Or what was that one with Valerie Bertinelli? I can't remember. Or Three's Company, or The Ropers. Those were all the things I grew up with. And as I got a little bit older, we watched a little bit more complex things. The Dukes of Hazzard. Thank you, Jay. Friday the 13th. That was like the scariest thing I saw when I was a kid. Pam says they are desensitized to violence, especially after playing video games. I absolutely agree. Just as most of us grew up with married parents and one who stayed at home. Also true. I mostly did, when I was growing up. My stepfather, had a regular 9 to 5 type job, and, my mom was home most of the time. And didn't really, I can't really feel like when I was younger that my television was supervised, or the movies I watched were supervised, because they'd go to bed and I'd stay up, late at night on the weekends and watch TV. But, I'd be watching like Nerds. Remember that show, Nerds? There was nothing on that would have corrupted my mind. In fact, most of the shows we watched back then were shows that taught us something. We learned from them. And I learned so many lessons from television back then. But a lot of those shows that taught us lessons back then, you can't watch them anymore, because now they consider them to be racist, or sexist or something else, which is absolutely insane. I learned a lot of really good lessons on television, but it's not the case these days. Just like Pam said, kids are desensitized to violence. They don't understand that when you take a life, it is permanent. It's permanent. It's a crime. And when that happens, you should be removed from society. Now, just because these little girls didn't carry out the crime, they were stopped. They should still be punished just as if they did. Because had someone not overheard them, guess what? That little boy would be gone right now. It would be just a horrific, terrible situation. And we've got to do better. We've just got to do better. Mandy says ABC after school specials. Yes, exactly, Mandy. I remember so many of those ABC after school specials, and I know I don't watch television. I haven't watched television in many years, but I don't think there's anything like that on now. And that's probably part of the reason why I started moving away from watching TV, because they were coming out with all of these shows that were so politically correct. And it was so scripted and so I don't know what to call it, what the proper word for it would be, but there were no lessons in there at all because you couldn't go far enough in any subject to be able to teach a lesson, because if you did, oh, you were racist. I remember watching The Facts of Life, as a teen girl, a young girl. I was probably younger than a teen. And it taught me so many lessons about relationships and, with not only, your friends, but with boys and other different people. We learn lessons. Schoolhouse Rock, that's a good one too. We watched Sanford and Son and, like I said, Good Times. And a lot of these different shows taught us about race relations and how different people perceive things than ourselves. But we don't have those lessons anymore because it's racist to do that. And it's really a shame. I hate it for kids these days. I really do. That they don't get to see the same programming we do. And it's so funny because all of these different networks say, "Oh, that's racist, that's sexist, that's xenophobic." But yet, you can have these horror gore movies and video games that teach nothing but violence, and that's okay. That's perfectly fine. And all these shows, and I'm not going out against people who are gay. I'm a firm believer anybody can live their life any way they want to live it. It is 100% up to you. I don't care how other people live their life, as long as they're happy and they're not hurting anyone. Doesn't matter to me. But there's a lot of programming on television, about the LGBTQ lifestyle. And I think if you ask most people who were born gay, and I do believe people were born gay, however you want to term it, and grow up. And I don't think they would wish that lifestyle necessarily on anyone else, because a lot of people who have grown up that way have really faced some hardships. They've dealt with a lot of things that they probably wouldn't necessarily wish on other people. But yet, these groups, not the gay people themselves, but the larger groups that are funded by Democrats, they push this stuff on kids to cause harm. There's no question about it. And Jay says, I lived for Saturday mornings. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Wasn't that the day? I remember when I was a real tiny kid, I would wake up early in the morning and the Lone Ranger was on. I mean, my poor parents, it was probably like 5 a.m. And I'd get up and I'd watch. You remember back whenever they had some of you were probably too young, when there was not programming all night long. At a certain time at night, it stopped and you saw that color bar come up. And it's like, okay, that's it. There was that sign on and sign off. And then in the morning, you'd have the anthem that would play. They'd show the flag and play the American anthem. Then, they'd go on and have the Lone Ranger. I can't remember what came after the Lone Ranger. Might have been Andy Griffith. I can't remember. And then it would go on to your cartoons and things like that. And then I remember in 1983 that I remember when we first got cable television. I think it was in 1983. And as soon as that happened, then of course we had TV all night long. And I remember the day MTV, first came out. It was such a big deal. But that it didn't teach me to kill anyone. Did it? And Jay says 4 channels and it signed off at night. Exactly. Sometimes just for memory purposes. I'll go back and listen to those sign-ons and sign-offs from television back then. You can find those on YouTube and go back. And when I'm upset with my internet, I will go back and listen to that old AOL dial up. And I'll be like, all right, all right. I am so thankful that we have the internet we have today, not that old AOL dial up, definitely showing my age. But anyway, lots of other stuff to talk about. I could reminisce all day about the old days because I'll tell you what, I grew up in the 80s and I'm sure every generation feels like their generation was the best, but I genuinely do feel like growing up in the 80s was the best. And you could never convince me otherwise. And let's see here. Mandy says at 10 p.m., it's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are? The 80s were great. Yes, they were, Mandy. And I remember back then, whenever they asked where your children are, why don't they do that now? I mean, do they not care where your children are now? Parents aren't accountable anymore at 10 p.m. where their children are. And trust me, when the street lights came on, we had to be near home. Now, not when I got older and was a teenager, but before I was a teenager, by dark time, you were home. Nobody had to see you all day. You could get up early in the morning, get on your bicycle, and ride off into the sunset. And if my parents only knew what I was doing back then, nothing bad, but my friends and I, man, we'd go and explore. I grew up in Chicago, in the Chicago suburbs. We'd go and we'd explore construction sites. We'd talk to the construction workers. It's a miracle we were never murdered, quite honestly. We'd be gone all day long, all day. We used to go to these construction sites where they were building new houses and apartment complex, and the workers would like give us popsicles and stuff. It was all very nice. Nothing weird or crazy ever happened. And but we do all kinds of stuff. And yes, Ryan, those were such wholesome times. You got that right. Jay says Sunday nights, wonderful world of Disney in the Wild Kingdom. I know. I miss those old shows like Jiminy Cricket. I remember in school, once in a great while, they'd have all of us kids would go into the gymnasium and sit on the floor and they'd play Jiminy Cricket or some other Disney movie. Good times for sure. And I hate it that, it's one of those things where you kind of wish you could go back and live it more slowly, don't you? But life is life. Life is life, and we must move on, not only in life, but in the show. But we should have a time where we talk about all this stuff because I love it. I want to show something to you that I think is kind of funny because, Donald Trump, if you guys recall, talked about how North Korea, instead of being such a crazy place, that they could actually turn their country into this beautiful place with beautiful beaches and turn it into a tourist area. And they have done exactly that. And this is a funny video. And I don't want to talk about this. I would much rather talk about the 80s. But we must move on. All right. So this is a tourist and Flipper. Yes, Mary. Oh, wait. Sorry. I am so sorry. I played the wrong video. I do hear. Here it is. I got my mind 80s. So this is North Korea. I'm going to turn this down because it's probably some North Korean music that's going to turn it. And let's see here. So North Korea, this is Wonsan can accommodate 20,000 tourists. Open on July 51st. Now, the question is that would you ever visit North Korea to stay at this resort? And if, what world would it be like? This is North Koreans celebrating development. There's the building back there. Now, if you were to visit North Korea, that's where you would be staying. It's a very large resort kind where they're all standing. I don't think I would visit Korea to stay at the resort. I'm not going to play the whole thing. That's a much longer video. Vernon, 60s were the best music, best cars. Best cars for sure. I don't know about music. I'm very much an 80s girl when it comes to music. But again, we all think that our generation lived through the best of times. And I hope kids still feel that way. That's all we can hope for is that the kids these days say the 90s were the best years, the 2000s were the best years, 2010s best years. I really hope that's the case. I don't see a lot of people saying that these days, so I'm not so sure, but I hope so. And oh yeah, Jay says you can guarantee this is state propaganda approved. So would you go to North Korea and visit their tourist areas? I wouldn't, and if you went, would it be fun? Would you feel like the government was watching over you the whole time? Would you be worried that you might disappear? I know if I were there, I would for sure be disappeared because I would be asking all the workers, what's it like to live here? What are all the country secrets? I would be asking all kinds of crazy questions. Do you want to escape with me? You can leave. They would for sure take me and I would never be seen again. But it does look like a beautiful area. And I have heard that North Korea is beautiful. And Jay, I know you've been all over the world. I don't know if you've been to North Korea, but I'm with you. Nope. Mary says, late 60s music is awesome. Lots of variety. Yeah, I've listened to some 60s and 70s music. I don't have time to listen to music, but I definitely prefer the 80s. And so North Korea, if you can imagine 20,000 tourists visiting North Korea, I mean, would there be restaurants? Would you be able to go out on the beach and just hang out? I don't trust anything in North Korea. I cannot see that being a relaxing vacation at all. And if you went, I mean, what kind of food would they have? We know so little about North Korea. I wouldn't even know what kind of restaurants they would have or what you would eat. I would be worried they'd have bugs all over my room. They'd probably have cameras, somewhere in the sand and the beach. I wouldn't trust it at all. But I do think it's a good try by them to try to be somewhat normal. If they can be normal, I'm not really sure. And one other story that has been kind of in the news that I wanted to touch base on today. Again, I'm just kind of skipping around these different news stories, no rhyme or reason. It's Friday. I generally don't even take notes, but I'm like, today I'm going to talk about a bunch of different things. So I did take a few notes, and I'm not going through them in any particular order, just a nice relaxed Friday. But Democrats fought so hard for Kilmar Abrego Garcia, didn't they? They fought so hard. They went out and they rioted and they cried and they carried on and wanted to impeach Trump. They wanted to harm us because this guy was deported to El Salvador, which is where he's from. He was in our country illegally. Yes, he's married. Yes, he has kids, but he was here illegally. He knew that deportation was going to come at one point or another. He had already been ordered to be deported before. It wasn't the first time. And then people said, well, he didn't even do anything. He wasn't a criminal. Well, guess what? He was a suspect. And we've talked about this before on the show. He was a suspect. They had questioned him. Not only, I haven't even heard this. We talked about it before, but I didn't hear this in the latest news. But they had questioned him in the past about a homicide. So, there could be even more he's implicated in down the road. But he's going to be deported. Now, maybe you guys have heard, I have not yet heard where he's going to be deported to, but he's going to be deported to another country, not El Salvador, where he's from, a completely different country. And he's going to go to prison. And, and I'm going to backtrack after I'm done talking about him about where these people go when they're deported. So his charges are going to be, because the Department of Justice is going to prosecute him before he's deported. They're going to charge him with human smuggling out of the state of Tennessee. And they made it very clear, law enforcement did, that, this is a guy that Democrats fought for, but he is accused and now being charged with some very horrific crimes, including trafficking children. Part of the smuggling that he is responsible for in the state of Tennessee, where he was caught, is trafficking children. Okay, so Democrats are fighting, and we've gone through this craziness for the past couple of months over this guy, and he is a child trafficker. I mean, we've known that. We all know that. We've known it from the beginning, but Democrats just don't care. They just don't care. They're going down this crazy path of no return, and they don't even know what they're doing. That's so crazy. They don't even know what they're doing. And Mary says, I keep hearing that, but is it true? It is definitely, if you're talking about the story I'm talking about now, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, it is absolutely true that he is being charged with human smuggling in the state of Tennessee by the Department of Justice. And yes, the prosecutors did say that part of that smuggling, I got something caught. I'm trying to figure out what it is. That part of that smuggling was trafficking children. Now, where he's going to be deported to, I have not yet heard. He didn't want to go back to El Salvador because he felt that his life was in danger in El Salvador. Now, we're coming up with these new plans, and it has been approved by a court where we can deport people to a third country, not the country they're from, but to a separate country altogether. And what happens to them when they get there, I do not know. Most of these people are criminals, so they're being released into the justice system in whatever country that is, a plan that we rearrange. It's not a situation where they're taking them, pushing them across the border, and then they're going to live homeless in a tent camp somewhere. That's not what's happening. They're being released into the custody of a jail judicial type system. And that's what's going to happen exactly to him. Jail is where he belongs, and jail he shall go. Mary says the deportation part. Let's see. Yeah, it is true, Mary. We are absolutely deporting illegals to countries that they did not originate from. And that happens a lot of times when either A, the country that they came from does not want them back, or B, when that person faces some type of persecution there. Let's say if they're related to gang activity, like Abrego Garcia, they go back to El Salvador, they're going to get murdered in the prisons. So they will send them to another country where no one knows them. So we are absolutely deporting people to a third country that's not related to their origination. And, you know, I don't know, should we or should we not? I don't know. Jay says, visit the DMZ and you'll understand why no one should go there. I agree, Jay. I know that's not where my first next vacation is going to go. And P. Diddy, remember we talked about P. Diddy yesterday. Do you remember that? We talked about P. Diddy and I was talking about his charges. And then here I heard that he was, two of charges have been dropped. Attempted kidnapping and arson. Prosecutors have dropped those charges. Now, how many more will they drop? Yesterday, I brought it up that it's that I heard in some of these back channels, can't confirm it to be true, although now we're starting to see these charges are being dropped, is that that he's made a deal with prosecutors that if his attorney or whoever it is holding the blackmail tapes on a lot of very important people, allegedly, even including Obama. So, oops, sorry, I'm losing my microphone and my headset. I don't know what is going on today, but glad it's Friday. That's what. And allegedly, there's a lot of big names in these blackmail tapes. So what I was talking about yesterday is that there's a story out there that prosecutors have made a deal with P. Diddy that if he has his attorney destroy those blackmail tapes, that they will drop the most serious charges against him. So we'll see how that plays out. And yesterday I was like, maybe it's true, maybe it's not true. Then I find out, yep, 2 charges being dropped, attempted kidnapping and arson. So we'll see where that goes in the future. We don't have a ton of time. I just want to throw a few more things in before we go. And I already talked about Pakistan. For those of you who weren't with us earlier, Pakistan secretly, our U.S. intelligence told us secretly, they are developing ballistic nuclear missiles that can reach the United States. And I'm telling you, a lot of people don't realize Pakistan is our enemy, but they certainly are and will continue to be so. So a lot of you may have missed that at the beginning of the show. Today, I'm just all tangled up in my stuff today. I don't know what's going on. Before we head out, one of the main things I want to talk about, well, we're going to talk about Lindsey Graham really fast. And I'm going to talk about Zohran Mamdani. Of course, you know, so much information about him right now and what's going on in the city of New York. We talked about that a little bit earlier in the week. We're going to talk about a little bit more. But first, you know, I don't know about you guys and how you feel about Lindsey Graham. I think Lindsey Graham is one of the biggest threats to Americans that exists. This guy wants to do nothing but go to war. That's all he wants to do. And I have said many, many times, if he is so keen on starting war and going to war, then you know what? Let's suit him up. Let's get him in one of those fighter jets and let's send him over there. How about that? Or let's put him in a nice military uniform and we'll send him out there to the front lines where our sons and daughters will end up going. This guy has lost his mind. Now he's talking, and you know, I'm so tired of talking about, quite honestly, the strikes on the nuclear facilities in Iran. Yes, it was a successful mission. Did it completely destroy their enriched uranium? Apparently, no one knows. No one knows. You know, they had about 900 pounds allegedly of enriched uranium, and no one seems to know, was it there? Was it not there? Everybody has a different story. I don't know the truth. But when I listen to this video with Lindsey Graham, it reminds me so much of back in the day when everybody was like, where's the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq? You know, here we went in, we got rid of Saddam, but where are the weapons? Do you remember those days? You know, I think think we forget. So back then, remember, we went into Iraq because they have weapons of mass destruction. They were going to kill, you know, hundreds of thousands of Americans and other, of course, folks around the world. And so we went into their country, we invaded them. We had a very long war that spun out a lot of terrorism, from that war. And we killed certainly a lot of Iraqis, that's for sure. And a lot of our own, unfortunately, Americans, heroes, died over there as well. And we never found any weapons of mass destruction. And people still talk about it, people like Lindsey Graham. But I want you to listen to what he's got to say here, because this guy is a complete moron.
Here's where we're at. The program was obliterated at those 3 sites, but they still have ambitions. I don't know where the 900 pounds of highly-enriched uranium exists, but it wasn't part of the target set.
Are you concerned that in light of that several years, when the administration is saying it's obliterated, it suggests that they're not able to build a weapon? But you're saying in several years, perhaps they'll be able to. Isn't there
that's what I'm saying. They're obliterated today, but you can reconstitute.
Oh man, that guy. Robert says, not a fan. Two-faced, no name number 2. I can't stand that man. I used to really like him a lot. And now I can't stand that guy. And this is going to be the ongoing theme. This is not going to end anytime soon. Everybody's saying, even Israel is saying right now, I've listened to numerous speeches by Israel themselves who've said, we don't know where the uranium is. Did they take it out? Did they not? I showed you guys a photo, I think it was last week, of a lot of trucks lined up at that Fordow nuclear complex, and it looked like they were loading something up and taking it away. Now, did they take away, 900 pounds of uranium? It didn't look like it. They looked like dump trucks. I can't imagine them being that careless with their uranium, but they did appear to be taking away something. What it was, we don't know. Did we really destroy the centrifuges? Donald Trump says yes, and that's good enough for me. But again, what does it matter anyway? What does it matter anyway? So did we destroy the centrifuges? Who knows? Did we get rid of their uranium? I'm going to say no, because there was no radiation detected or anything like that. Did they get it out in time? Did we just not reach down far enough? Does it matter? Does any of it really matter? I'm so tired of the back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. The CNN report and all that stuff. I don't even care. I don't know if you guys care. I don't care, because none of it matters. Why? Because we know Iran has secret nuclear facilities. Secret nuclear facilities. We all know that the primary sites they call their nuclear facilities, yes, they do have those nuclear facilities, but we know, I've known my entire life, and I think you guys have too, that Iran operates in the dark. They have secret nuclear facilities, not the ones that have a building that says nuclear facility on it, not those, the secret ones. So do they still have the possibility that they're still working on nuclear weapons? Probably. Are we going to do anything about it right now? Probably not. We'll probably wait a couple more years. We're going to say, oh, remember back in 2025 when we struck and, decimated those nuclear facilities? Well, guess what? Iran, they're making more nuclear weapons. We got to, get over there and do something. Mary says, why do they always get so much time to do things? Robert says, was Graham Obama's Senate secret lover? Was Graham Obama's... I'm going to have to say that's like a tongue twister. Was Lindsey Graham, Obama's Senate secret lover? I would not be surprised at all, Robert, if that were the truth. I wouldn't be surprised at all. But I know one thing, I am ready for that news cycle to be over. I am so tired of talking about Israel and Iran and their nuclear weapons. I still say it was just a big facade. It was just all about a regime change. And we probably will see a regime change take place. We probably will. There's a lot of people who claim that it's already happened and we just don't know about it yet. But already the powers that be, while Khomeini was out of the town, have already taken over, and sooner or later it's going to be a little bit more obvious than what it already is. I will always believe that what happened over in Iran has been planned for a long time. It was about a regime change. It was not about nuclear weapons. And just like what happened in Iraq, just like what happened in Libya, just like what happened in Lebanon and so many other countries, we could go down the line. And that will continue to happen throughout history in our lives, our children's lives, their children's lives. We will continue to replace regimes. If somebody does something we don't like, And I agree with it. I can't stand the Islamic Republic. I am glad that there's a regime change, hopefully, in place. That's absolutely necessary, as long as they don't replace them with someone worse, which, as history has shown us, has always happened. Let's hope this doesn't happen at this time. Jay says, not likely. It would detect radiation being buried under tons of mountains underground. Testing in Nevada doesn't even show signs topside. You're right, Jane. I'm going to talk about this on Monday, but there's a lot of talk. Remember how Iran had that, they had that, oh, what was it? The earthquake that took place in the middle of all this conflict. Well, Marco Rubio made a very interesting speech. I'm not going to play it today. I'm going to maybe do that on Monday. I didn't quite read between the lines in the same way a lot of people did, but a lot of people are talking about him and the speech he made because he was talking about underground nuclear weapon testing or underground nuclear war. And I'm thinking, people were saying, oh, he's talking about nuclear war underground. That could only mean earthquakes. Is that what happened? Were they hoping to destroy these nuclear facilities with an underground earthquake? I don't know. We'll talk about that a little bit more on Monday because I'm going to look into that a little bit further before I get too far into that conversation. Good morning, Nancy. We only got we're actually a little bit, 2 minutes over our time, but we're going to talk about it really fast. Zohran Mamdani, because how can we not? Him saying that there's 1 million Muslims in New York City. Of course, they're going to vote for him. I have seen countless videos of celebrities going, walking around doing their little videos like, hey, if you're in New York City, make sure you vote for Zohar because he's our guy. He's going to do everything for us. And this guy is probably a terrorist. And I know that might be taking it a little bit far. I'm going to show you a video of him and exactly who's going to be voting for him. So here he is talking about his socialist beliefs.
Grocery prices are out of control. The cost of eggs and milk has skyrocketed. Some stores are even using dynamic pricing, jacking up the cost over the course of a day depending on what they can get away with. It doesn't need to be this way. I'm Zohran Mamdani, and as mayor, I will create a network of city-owned grocery stores. It's like a public option for produce. We will redirect city funds from corporate supermarkets to city-owned grocery stores, whose mission is lower prices, not price gouging. These stores will operate without a profit motive or having to pay property taxes or rent, and will pass on those savings to you.
Okay, so that's called socialism. Government ran grocery stores is called socialism. There's no other way to term it. That is actually socialism. And that's what Democrats want. I'm going to stop for a second. Phyllis on the comment line says, please pray for our Ohio Valley area. We had a second round of flooding last night. Please say a prayer for the Ohio Valley. They did have a second round of flooding. Phyllis, I had no idea. I'm very sorry. I will certainly be saying some prayers for you and for the Ohio Valley. No question about it. I hate to see that. Mary says, how's he going to pay for everything that he wants to do? Good question. Good question. And one more thing, too. After we're done talking about him, I want to talk to you about an event that's coming up this weekend with some of our favorite speakers, including, of course, Mr. Eigel, who is one of my favorites. So we're going to talk about that here in just a moment also. So don't lose me there. I'm going to show you why. I'm going to show you why this guy is so popular in New York City. And I don't think this is going to blow your mind, quite honestly, but take a look at this.
صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا
So this guy's probably going to win. He's up against Eric Adams, and Cuomo, of course, already dropped out because he knew he's not going to win. Eric Adams, I don't think Eric Adams has been that bad. And I don't think Eric Adams is going to win. I think Mamdani is going to win. And I think the reason why is exactly what he said. He's getting the votes from two different groups. One is that there are 1 million Muslims in New York City. We know that they have no-go zones in New York City. Pretty soon, the entire of New York City is going to be a no-go zone. Secondly, we have really dumb white liberals, just really dumb white liberals who are all for this guy. I've seen countless ones on videos Please vote for Zohar. He's going to save our city. Blah, blah, blah. No, idiots. He's going to create a no-go zone, and you're not even going to be allowed to go there. That's what he's going to do. So here are some of his policies. This is what he's campaigning on. He wants to end cooperation with ICE. He wants to end deportations of criminals. He wants to abolish prisons. He wants to defund the police, decriminalize all drugs. I am not even kidding you. This is what this guy is campaigning on. Have taxpayer funded sex changes for kids. That's in New York City. This is I can't imagine anybody worse running for office, and this guy will most likely get elected. I absolutely think he's going to get elected. And and here we have Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, Kathy Hochul, AOC, a whole bunch of other Democrats already congratulating him on his win, already stepping up, saying this guy has got the win. And this is what they call a left wing revolution. And that's exactly how it's playing out. And I don't know about you guys, but it absolutely terrifies me. Do people not understand? Do they not understand that this is that this is a socialist regime? Do they not get it? I don't think they do. Mary says, someone said they want his citizenship revoked. I don't think that can happen. I don't know. No, I don't think it can happen either. And Jay says, I'm not sure he wins if stronger Democrat candidate emerges. Cuomo isn't popular enough. And what about Eric Adams? So, that's the man standing that he's up against now. I don't know. I think these people will find a way to come out and vote and get him in, because he's got a lot of New York City people behind him. Now, there's a lot of us conservatives in New York City is too. Now, a lot of them left during COVID time. So how are there enough left to make sure this guy doesn't win? I don't know. I think that our country has been moving towards socialism. Take some time out. Go look over at what's going over in the UK if you don't already know what's going on over in Ireland. And then tell me that's not going to happen right here in the United States. And what I want to know is, and I know Donald Trump has a lot on his agenda, why hasn't he banned Sharia law? Sharia law, we already have law in this country. Already have our own judicial system. We don't need Sharia law. When you're in our country, you abide by our American rules, not by the rules of your former country. We don't live in this country under Sharia law. However, we have no-go zones in Texas, Michigan. We have them in New York City, probably many other places across the area. I believe there's one in somebody told me there's one in Columbia, Missouri. I've been there many times. I've never seen a no-go zone in Columbia, Missouri, but that's something people tell me. Maybe it's a really tiny little area. I don't know. But, why hasn't Donald Trump stood up and wrote an executive order and said there is no such thing as a no-go zone in this country? Why hasn't he stood up and said we are banning Sharia law in this country? And then if you practice Sharia law in the United States, you are going to go to prison. Why isn't he saying this? I don't understand. I just don't understand. Jay says because Sharia law is protected under the freedom of religion. Jay, here's where we will differ when it comes to that. Sharia law is not about religion. It's literally about law. If you go into some of these areas where they practice Sharia law, they have their own court system. They have their own police force. Now, they can believe by religion, and I'm not saying you're wrong, because yes, we do protect it under religious freedom, but how far should religious freedom go? Okay, well, I'm Christian. Am I going to, block off my area, my town, and say, we live under Christian law. We're going to have our own court system, our own judicial system, our own police force, and I get it. Somebody might say, well, the Amish do it, and they do. But Amish people will also, if people find out about the crimes they have committed, they will be prosecuted under typical American law. That doesn't happen with Sharia law. Under Sharia law, let's say a man and a woman get a divorce. Automatically under Sharia law, the men get to keep the children and the women are cast out and they get absolutely nothing. They don't get any part of the marital property. They get zilch and they're cast out from their area. They end up either homeless on the street or taken in by some other groups or go back to another country, maybe where they have family. And you can commit some pretty horrific laws in these areas, and there's no responsibility, no accountability for breaking those laws. And that includes some very serious crimes against children and against women. But yet, we have liberals in our country who want to vote for Sharia law. I mean, how can you even make sense of this? I will never understand. I'll never understand. And Jay says, but they let's see here. They have it tied to their religious beliefs. Unfortunately, they do. But that doesn't mean that Donald Trump can't come up and say, no more. We are not going to allow Sharia law in this country. Yes, you can practice your religion any way you want, except when it comes to policing and when it comes to the judicial system. We have one judicial system in this country. We have one order, which is law enforcement, law and order, not your own little Sharia beliefs. And I'm getting really frustrated that these things aren't happening. Donald Trump and his friend, and I'm not going after Trump right now. I said the same thing about Biden and every other president that we had while we had experienced Sharia law in our country. It's not against Donald Trump, but he is our current president. And I want to know why he's not addressing Sharia law in this country. There are women being beaten, children being abused sexually and otherwise, and we don't do a darn thing about it. We just turn and look the other way because it's about religious freedom. Religious freedom ends when it comes to sexual abuse. Or does it? Or does it? I wasn't even going to talk about this today. But you know what? While we're here, let's just throw this in too. I'm not going after Donald Trump, even though it seems like I am. I'm not. I still love and respect Donald Trump, but he does things sometimes that I don't agree with. And most recently, that was about the Catholic religion. I'm Catholic. So just so you know, I'm Catholic. Before we jump into this conversation, I'm not speaking badly about Catholics. I am Catholic. And so most recently, there was an executive order written. I wasn't planning on talking about this today. We can talk about it more next week if you want. But there was an executive order written to protect confessions within the Catholic Church. And I kind of thought that was wrong, and you'll probably disagree with me, but under this executive order written by Donald Trump's White House, we have a situation where, people come in and they confess. And more importantly, priests confess to other priests. And this executive order protects those priests, where if they come in and they confess that they have abused children, violated children, that the priest they're confessing to should not contact the police and should not reveal what was confessed to them. That under Catholic religious freedom, that you can confess your sins without persecution. Now, again, I don't agree with that any more than I agree with Sharia law. And just because I'm Catholic and this is against the Catholic, involving the Catholic religion, if I'm a priest or just me, myself, and I go into confession, and when I go into confession and I say I have harmed a child, or I have harmed this person, or I've done this, yes, I should absolutely be prosecuted. I understand that it's a big quagmire, isn't it, of what is and is not right when it comes to religious freedom. But no, I don't agree that we should have an executive order that protects these priests who are abusing children, who are confessing their sins. It aggravates me to no end. It aggravates me so much I'm having a hard time talking about it. Robert says we are already a socialized country, just moving further to the left until we collapse. Robert, that is 100% correct. And people, we're not doing enough about it. We went the right direction. We elected Donald Trump. Now we've got to get this is our duty, our job, to get his head out of creating peace in the Middle East and start working on our country here. What happened to America first? Let's jump back in to America first. How about that? And let's start working on Sharia law. Let's start protecting our children a little bit more than we already are. Let's start working on our home base, because I'll tell you what, we got a lot of problems right here in our own country. Let's just mind our business when it comes to the Middle East and what's going on with Ukraine and Russia. Let's not give them any more weapons. Let's just leave it all alone and start focusing on our home base and what's best for Americans and making America great again. We're not doing that. We're on the wrong path. And I'm sorry for saying that. I know that's going to upset some people. We'll talk more about that next week, but we are on the wrong path. We're doing some really great things here in our country, but we've got to refocus and get back to the game plan. frustrating to me. Let's see. Robert replying to Jay, economic system wrapped around fake religious claims. Jay says peace in the Middle East affects his country. Yes, I mean it does. To some degree, I mean peace in the Middle East affects the whole world, but there will never be peace in the Middle East. That will never happen. It's not going to happen in our lifetimes. Donald Trump needs to refocus back here in the United States. Let's get our business in order. In the meantime, while we're worried about peace in the Middle East, Jay, and I'm not directing this in a negative way towards you, is that look what's happening. Our own country is being taken over by socialists and by radical Islamist caliphates. I mean, come on. We've got to concentrate on here first. Then we'll worry about everything else that's going on out there. Let's just stay out of everybody else's business. Stop policing the world and bring it back home. Because I'll tell you what's going on in New York City, what's going on in these no-go zones, what's going on, in our Catholic churches and other religious establishments where children are being harmed. And there's a lot of them. I'm not calling out the Catholics, being a Catholic myself. A lot of is going on in this country when it comes to harming children. That affects us right now today. The stuff in the Middle East, it's on the outskirts. It's on the outskirts. So I want to talk about that. We'll talk more about all that stuff next week. In the meantime, before we head out, I want to talk about, do you guys know David Robertson? I've interviewed David before. He is running. He's in Jefferson County. And, just a super nice guy. He has an event coming up this weekend. It's going to be tomorrow, Saturday. If you're in the area, if you're able to go, please do so. He's running for Missouri House District 97. He's going to be on the show one day next week. I know him personally. He's a really nice guy. And, when we start talking about things going in the right direction, this guy is definitely the right direction. And he's got an event coming up tomorrow. He's got some great guest speakers. Now, this is going to happen tomorrow, 6 p.m., Sugar Creek Golf Course, which is in High Ridge, Missouri. And here's kind of the plan for the night. It's going to be 5 p.m. VIP social hour. They're going to have hors d'oeuvres and an open bar. 6 p.m. dinner, cash bar music. 7 p.m. 6 featured speakers, Billy Crow and jazz. And then let's see, here are the speakers. And I love all of these folks. We're going to have Bill Eigel. We all know Bill Eigel, one of my favorite people in the state of Missouri, Justin Sparks, Jim Avery, Amy DeClue, and Bryant Wolfen. You can purchase tickets at I'm gonna put the link on my website because it's a lot to read, but you can basically look up Robertson for Missouri. If you just go to Robertson's for Missouri, you can find the link. That's the easier way to do it. But I'm going to post this on my personal Facebook page so you guys can all check this out. VIP tickets are $100. Dinner is $50. Go to robertsonformissouri.com. That's where you can purchase your tickets. I wish I could go. I have too much going on this weekend, but I would really like to go. You can also call them. You can call Lisa at 314-409-0758. Or again, go to robertsonformissouri.com. We're going to have David on one day next week. We're going to talk to him probably a couple of different times. I want to talk to him first about him running for office. And he is one of us. He, is part of Colonel Joe Adams' Washington Guard. He is definitely one of us. I think he will be one of the best representatives we can have in Missouri. So if you can go out and support this dinner that he is partaking in, as well as if you're in the Jefferson County area, make sure you cast your vote for David Robertson as well. Now, I'm going to have him come on and talk about his candidacy next week. But on another day and on another note, I want him to come back on and talk about some other things. I've known David for a while, not real well, but I've known him for a while. We've talked on a number of occasions, and he has a cabin completely off grid. Now, he doesn't live there, full time. He has spent a lot of time there, but it is absolutely amazing to me, the ideas that he has. He has this off grid cabin, and I can't recall exactly where it is right now, but it runs on solar power. He has a huge garden there, a stream that runs through. And to me, that's kind of like a life goal. I would love to live somewhere off grid. Now, of course, I would want to have solar powered air conditioning if I can do that, maybe some other solar powered things, but I think it's absolutely amazing. And I would like to talk to him down the road about his cabin and how he manages to live off grid for much of the year. So I think that's pretty interesting. And of course, in Jefferson County. And but that's about it for me today. Got lots more to talk about next week. And I'm not upset with Donald Trump as much as it seems like it. I still think he's the best person any of us could have possibly voted for. He is still the right man to make America great again. I don't think I'm alone in being a little bit frustrated that there's things going on in this country that I feel like we need to tackle. Sharia law being one of those, socialism being one of those, and maybe there's things going on behind the scenes that we don't even know about. But there's just so much, and maybe I'm just being impatient. I want it to all happen now, and it's not happening right now, and I'm getting a little bit impatient about it. But we'll talk about it again next week, and I'll be curious of your thoughts. If you have any, definitely reach out to me and let me know if you are or are not happy with what you're seeing taking place in this country and about our foreign policy. I would love to know. And again, it doesn't mean we don't support Donald Trump. Every president's going to have things that we wish they did a little bit different or wish they focused on one area more than another. So it's okay. But either way, we'll touch base on it next week. Hope you guys all have a really fantastic weekend. I have to work today. I'm going to be spending a lot of time out in my garden. Be sure to reach out to David Robertson for Missouri.com or Robertson for Missouri.com if I can get that right. And I will look forward to talking to you all on Monday. Have a good weekend, everyone.